Good morning. It's Saturday. Got a lot of stuff to do today. I have a break in the weather, so I've got to do yard work, as boring as that is. So what I want to do is get some stuff painted that can be drying while I am doing the necessary things that one does when you're a responsible homeowner. Learned a little bit of a lesson. Yes, it is possible to learn, but I learned a little bit of a lesson from the inconvenience of painting the strong back, and that is making double sure before I mount this other nacelle that I can paint the areas that might be tough to get to once it is mounted. Since the other nacelle is mounted, I'll have to paint it in place. The only other restrictive thing that really needs done that's going to be tougher to do once they're in place is to paint this little mamma jammy right here. There's a black detail inside this grill, and it's just going to be much easier to paint that now outside of the before I attach it. This needs to be black, and that little attached piece on the back needs to be black, and I can hit both of those at the same time. And I can also attach something that I had painted but hadn't attached yet, which is this clear piece that goes on the back there. So a little bit of construction and painting before I put it in place, and I can go and do the same things to the other nacelle that is attached to the pylon. Okay, here's a little bit of an update. Remember I told you that I had put another coat of paint on the deflector dish. Well, there's the deflector dish with two coats of copper on it. I painted the center. You can see how well the veins in the center, the fins in the center, let light through the back. And here's what it looks like on the ship. And here we go. That's the dish in place. You can see the light coming through the fins just wonderfully. I think the only thing I'm going to do now is to lightly sand the edge of the dish just to knock the copper off of it so that we'll get that light coming out at the outside edge. And here are the details I painted on the nacelle, like I said, to take care of before I mounted them. I painted that bit black. I've mounted that strip at the bottom, painted that doohickey black as well, and the fronts of these fins I've painted black. I may, mind you, not use the gray decals for the tops of the fins, but instead paint those. I think they would be easy enough to mask off that I could just simply paint them. We'll find out. And of course the black painted on the nacelle that is attached. See, that black is painted, so the inside of the nacelles would be difficult to get to once they're both mounted. So take care of it now. Best time for it. I think I'm going to go ahead and put the gray inboard decal. There's a gray stripe that goes in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and put those on before I put the other nacelle on. Just easier to do that stuff now before it gets to too close quarters. Good evening. It's Saturday night. It is a little bit after 7 o'clock. Took some time off this afternoon to go out and get something to eat. I did do the bushes and the front yard, backyard, if that matters to anybody. I spotted a little bit of a friendly visitor that I'm going to splice into to this report just because I think it's neat. Tonight on the docket we've got nacelle attachment. I've got the starboard nacelle attached. It's wired in. It's doing its thing. And tonight I'm going to wire in and attach the port nacelle. I will get both of those attached. I will get the saddle piece glued in and to a point where I will be doing the epoxying and then letting that set up. So without further ado, I'm going to get on with it. Okay, everything is wired up and a little bit of heat shrink on each of the connections. If you can see down into there, all the ribbon cables have been joined together. The 9-volt circuits have been joined together and tucked up into the front. And I did notice something interesting that I don't know if I'd quite expected it or not, but I noticed that when I attached the two nacelles to the back, the ship became back heavy and it doesn't want to balance on the stand like I would like. So I'm going to have to add, that's why I've got this flashlight sitting in here, because if I take it off it wants to kick back. I may end up having to put some sort of little weight in here. Don't know exactly what that'll be made of, but I might just have to tape down some pennies in there to weight down the front of the ship to have it sit on the base better. But something to think of. Cumulative math, never my strong suit. But this is what you wanted to see. You wanted to see the nacelles all lit up. So the starboard nacelle is glued. The port nacelle is only on with a clamp. So that's why it's kicking out a little bit. But hold on, let me turn the light off. Okay. Let's fire them up. Ta-da! That's the both of them. Tenant controls, you've done it again. And the window lights are lighting. The nacelles are both lit. Both lit from the back. Both lit from underneath. So now the tricky work of putting the saddle piece in comes along, and what that is going to entail is I'm going to tape down, well first I'm going to tuck those wires in, and again I need to put that weight back in the front to keep it from falling backwards. So what I need to do at this point is tuck that wiring in into the body, kind of neaten that up a little bit, and then I've got to glue this joint right up here. I put some super glue in there and glue that up and let it clamp for a while, and then the tricky thing is to put the saddle piece in. I call this the saddle piece. And what happens with it is that it goes in place, and I pour some 5-minute epoxy, not the 1-minute stuff, 5-minute epoxy up in this joint, and I kind of butter the joints with it to make it strong, and then I just clamp the bejesus out of it and hold it all into place while it sets up. Now once it's in place, I will have to do some red putty blending on the front and the back to get rid of those seams, but that's the next step. So let's see how she goes. Okay, what we have here is a symphony of clamps. I did as I said I was going to. I took the inside of that saddle piece, and well, actually the part that the insides go against, I actually put the 5-minute epoxy on that side and then slid the saddle piece in between there and jammed it in there and clamped it up. Now the weird thing about these pylons, the way they're shaped and those little plastic clamps I use, they kept wanting to slide off. The angle of them was such that they would just slide right off of there. So what I did is I took some sandpaper and I folded it in half, and I put that sandpaper right in here. And the clamp is, the paper on the back of the sandpaper is rough enough that the clamps are holding onto that just fine, and of course the sandpaper grit is holding on to the paint. Now it's not going to mark it up or anything because it's not sliding against it, it's just being held in place, but that allowed me to put the clamps on there without them wanting to go flying off or slide off the edges. Neat little trick I picked up. Use it if you think it'll help you. But this is sitting in 5-minute epoxy. It's about 20 minutes after 8 right now, and that is going to stay until tomorrow. I am not going to touch it until for the rest of the evening. So just let that sit, and this will be the final report for tonight.